Ash Ketchum versus Yugi Moto. A very anticipated death battle for years, one that I've always wanted to see. That is a complete and utter stomp. Hello everybody, my name is Groundback. I normally do videos going over Pokemon, and I've done a little bit of Yu-Gi-Oh videos. I'm a big fan of both franchises, and with Death Battle announcing the Death Battle coming in December, I think, I just want to talk about this. It's just gonna be a unedited, mostly podcast video, so if you want to listen to that, sit back, relax, and listen to a guy nerd out about two franchises he really likes. Now, the reason I called this matchup a stomp is because I think Ash vs. Yugi is very much a sort of skill check if you know about, well, really anything about Yu-Gi-Oh! Most people, if you don't know much, on the surface, it looks like just a guy with holograms going up against actual monsters. But I think the fact that this is a death battle that's actually going to happen, I'm pretty sure most people have to assume, even if you know nothing about Yu-Gi-Oh!, they can't just be holograms, because otherwise, what's the point? It'd be a stomp. And that's true. It would be a stomp. But you know what? Yu-Gi-Oh! From the very beginning, even before the actual trading card game, was all about ancient Egyptian magic. And it's not just Yugi, he's also accompanied by the Pharaoh. And this right here alone is the reason why it's such a stomp. Even with all of Ash's Pokemon, all of their feats, it really doesn't mean much. Ash could be completely superior physically, and Yugi could just Mind Crush or summon a Shadow game. And even goes way deeper than that, because once you actually look at like how things work in Yu-Gi-Oh!, it becomes insane. Now granted, it's not like Pokemon is like a fodder franchise or anything, and Ash Ketchum and his Pokemon in particular are pretty decent, I would say. I don't know what tier I would put them at. I know in like Versus Wiki it says like multiversal, which doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I'm sorry, like I get that like Ash tried to stop like Palkia, Dialga, and Cyrus was like using them, but I really don't think you can scale most trainers to Palkia and Dialga. But there is one thing that Ash does that the Pokemon franchise has been pretty consistent with as a whole, but you see it especially with Ash Ketchum and his Pokemon. And those are reactive evolution and accelerated development. Now, if you don't know what those are, reactive evolution is just adaptation. So think about like SCP-682 or like Godzilla, where you have the ability to like have massive like changes to yourself mid-combat, usually in response to something, whether it be someone else or most of the time in response to your environment or what you're fighting. And accelerated development is where you get massively more powerful in stats as the fights go on. Now, the Pokemon franchise has already been consistent with that with all of the games and anime. For example, in Sun and Moon, you know how your Pokemon can like get crit if they want to be praised more, or just shrug up status, or survive at 1 HP? That's basically what it is. Because the Pokemon franchise has always had this thing where you're having a bond with your Pokemon, and Pokemon they'll always try to push farther, go beyond the limits to please their trainers. And I think the best example, outside of a lot of things that Ash Ketchum has done, is actually in the manga. Because there's one part in the manga where I believe Blue Scyther actually adapts and starts hitting ghost types with normal attacks. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's something that happens. And while I don't think you do something that unusual, Ash, yeah, when it comes to like anime pro tag BS or power of friendship, anything you could think of, Ash has probably done. Especially when it comes to his Pikachu. if you ever watch the anime, one thing you'll probably notice once you're actually looking for it, basically every single time a Pokemon evolves, almost every time it's never defeating something and then evolving afterwards. It's usually mid-combat, and usually in response to, like, Ash being in distress or someone being in trouble. So many Pokemon have evolved in the middle of Team Rocket attacking, or in the middle of a really important battle. And these are honestly good hacks, and ones that on paper could actually give Yugi a run for his money. And obviously we're under the assumption that he can interact with Yugi's monsters, which may be easier said than done. I already mentioned briefly about, like, shadow games and, like, mind crushes with Yugi, and that's with this Millennium Puzzle. And that's honestly a sad part about this. You don't even need Egyptian God cards or Dark Magician. You can generally make an argument that Yugi can just win with just by himself with the Millennium Puzzle. But I want to go over the monsters first, because obviously the fact that this is going to be an episode that's going to happen in the first place, everyone is probably assuming they're not going to be holograms. But what are they? Are they flesh and blood? Well, not exactly. Yu-Gi-Oh! And this is, like, a common thing for all of the series, except for, like, I guess, Reigns and the Go Rush series. But most Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, the monsters are heavily associated as not just spirits, but as literal embodiments of said duelist. In the manga, and maybe a little bit in the Dawn of the Duel arc, when Yugi goes back in time, they have an explanation on what these monsters are. And basically, everything in Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be boiled down to Ka and Ba. Ka is the embodiment of someone's soul, which ends up becoming the monsters. So if you have a good soul, the monster will reflect that, and if you're bad, etc. So for things like Dark Magician for Yugi, or Blue Eyes White Dragon for Seto Kaiba, like, their ace monsters are basically just the literary embodiment of them. And then there's Ba, which is also the soul, but the very essence itself. So it takes Ba to power Ka, and if Ka gets destroyed, it hurts Ba. And that is life points. So that's the reason why in Shadow games, and in other various Yu-Gi-Oh! Media, such as, like, Zexal near the end, where they die if they lose, or in Reigns, when they, like, die after they lose during the Ignis arc. That's why, like, people can just actually be hurt by these monsters. So that means that the monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are all abstract concepts. So, for another character, Jack Atlas, he claims many times that Red Dragon Archfiend is the embodiment of his soul. And this is something consistent throughout all of the series. Granted, GX, 5D, Zexals, Arc 5, none of these series ever talk about Ka and Ba, but I also don't feel like they need to. This is the thing that's been established in the original series, and even when they ever say it, like, most of the time they don't give explanations for why they die in the other series either. Like, for Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5, for example, you have this one guy that was split into 4, long story, but the point is, like, this guy named Zark gets split into 4 people, and 2 of them are Yuto and, I believe, Yuga. The 2 of them have a duel. Yuto loses, and then he just dies. And the person, the original person, his name was Zark, he was someone that managed to make the monsters real, and not just holograms. So, this is very much same for Yugi, but it's even way more direct, because the Millennium Puzzle can directly make them real. And back in ancient Egyptian times, like, basically all of the people in Egypt, or at least the high-ranking ones, were able to not only, like, capture these monsters and seal them in tablets, but also, in many cases, summon them as well. One of the first things we see when Yugi goes back in time is someone having an evil spirit, and people using the Millennium items to take the monster out of their soul and trapping it into a stone tablet. And not only is every single monster in Yu-Gi-Oh!, at least back then, not only were they in tablets, but we learned from GX, I think a little bit from the original series, that basically all of the cards you see have souls in them too. I believe there's been a few times, mainly with, I think it was Jesse with this Crystal Beast and this Spirit Hunter, but I'm pretty sure like all of the cards have souls in them. Which doesn't really matter too much, since most people don't have a way to actually summon them. But for Yugi, it's very easy. Another thing I want to mention is that, with Millennium Magic, it's more than just summoning monsters. You can also theoretically use their, like, spell and trap cards as well. And I'll mention someone that didn't even have a Millennium item. Seto Kaiba, with the Egyptian arc, also goes back in time. And there's one moment where Zork tries to kill the main cast and Kaiba saves him by using a spell card. Now, you can argue that, like, because of how, like, Bakura, like, it's a long story, but basically, he kind of turned everything to a giant board game. So you could argue Kaiba was only manipulating that. But you have the movie, the Dark Side of Dimension movie, where Seto Kaiba was able to, through sheer will alone, able to grab Obelisk the Tormentor from the afterlife and use it in a duel. Which is particularly impressive because the God cards are fully aware and they kill anyone unworthy, but Kaiba was still able to summon him and use him in battle. And there's stuff like that everywhere in Yu-Gi-Oh! In every series, basically every time, it's never just holograms. You gotta have stakes somehow, and I can't think of a single exception where there wasn't, like, a real danger. The most I can think is, like, Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, I think it was called, where, like, I think most of the time the main danger was just the destruction of rush jewels. Which, like, sure, but yeah, it's, like, you could probably understand why this is a bit of a stomp. If you're actually going with how Yu-Gi-Oh! Is, like, go with its lore, I feel like the way the battle should go, where it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters are abstract concepts with Ka, so Ash shouldn't be able to even hit them. And since they attack the soul directly, since if you don't have any monsters in the field, you can just attack life points directly, and aka Ba, they should just be able to attack Ash or his Pokemon souls. And if you think that sounds like a stretch, there's a case of this happening in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. There's one time in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX where a character named Jesse is possessed by the spirit of Yubel. So there's one point where Jaden Yuki, the protagonist, uses his ace monster, Elemental Hero Neos, to attack Jesse, and as he attacks, that made an opening for Jaden to go into Jesse's soul and talk to some of his other monsters who told Jaden how to free, their master, basically. So, that's just Jaden Yuki, someone without any Millennium item. And, like I said before, for many series like Zexal or Arc 5, they just die. Like, they just die if they lose a card game. So, even if, like, they don't outright stay it, I'm pretty sure that every series has a case where monsters attacking and making life points go down to 0 is literally you damaging your souls. And all I'm saying this here is just with normal monsters. Or not, like, literal normal monsters with no effect, but, like, basically, like, just your everyday monsters using regular duels. This is nothing of Dark Magician or even the Egyptian God cards. Believe me, we'll get to that. Before that, though, I do want to talk more about Ash, because I want to be fair. Because even though I think this is a stomp, I think there are some arguments you can maybe make. I don't think they're that strong, but it's possible. Like I said, there was a scene in the manga where Scyther was able to learn how to attack ghost types. And in general, all Pokemon, and even the humans, I think, have non-physical interaction. since there are ghost Pokemon who, as you can probably imagine, act like ghosts, going through walls and being like not able to be hit with any normal moves. Like, most Pokemon can still hit those. They just need to use any elemental attack, that isn't just fighting or normal attacks. And I forget when it happens, but I'm pretty sure there's a case where Ash Ketchum was able to interact with ghosts via Aura. Which, by the way, that's something that Ash has. Pokemon like Lucario have Aura, which is... I don't think it's particularly impressive on its own. Always compared to Aura in, like, other shows, but I think it so helps Ash's willpower exponentially. And I think that's what helps him, like, come back from the dead or get revived at some point. Like, I know in the Manaphy movie, there's just one scene where he just has, like, he's just kind of, like, covered in white and he's able to fly somehow. I think, like, definitely in the first movie, and maybe in I Choose You, Ash Ketchum dies and manages to come back. I think it's very unreliable, though, so I don't think it's, like, let's say Po from, like, Kung Fu Panda, who can theoretically just die and come back whenever he wants. But it's worth mentioning. Despite that, though, the non-physical interaction, I'm not fully convinced it can work against the Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters. Because non-physical interaction is nice, but for Pokemon, it's just intangibility. Intangibility and non-corporeal are technically different things. It's a long story, I don't feel like explaining it here, because I don't think I would do a particularly good job at doing that. But luckily I don't have to, because the part that I think you could probably understand is that, like, being an abstract concept, it goes way deeper than just, being intangible. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters are, like, actual embodiments of their wielder's soul. And one thing I forgot to mention, but that's very important, is the fact that for Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelists, their monsters, just like with Digimon, and how in Digimon, all of the Digimon, like their Digivolutions and their power-ups, come directly from their tamers, it's the exact same thing from Yu-Gi-Oh! So in Yu-Gi-Oh!, if you summon a monster, you need to physically have the power with your Ba in order to summon it and make it real. So that's going to go into the next point, which is going to be physicality. I guess technically on paper, Ash is just straight up stronger. You have things like the pre-evolve for Solgaleo and Lunala, which is like, I forget how heavy it is, but it's like real, like stupid heavy. You also have like Larvitar, which like weigh a few hundred pounds. And there's like one random scene in the Gen 3 anime where Ash can just completely like lift a log. So like, yeah, that's pretty strong. And there's at least like one or two cases where he tackles somebody. And in the Mewtwo movie, he tried to, punch Mewtwo, which didn't really particularly go well. But it does show that even without his Pokemon, Ash has shown and is capable of, I can't say that word, I'm sorry. He can do physical harm, that's what I'm trying to say. And yeah, Yugi's not really like that. In fact, in Season 0, which is, what happened before the trading card game became the main focus of the franchise. Yeah, Yugi got hands, but he got pushed around by everyone, basically. He got punched and beat up by bullies, but it really doesn't matter. And that's because of two reasons. The first is because most Yu-Gi-Oh! Characters are stone walls. If you don't know what a stone wall is, that's where someone has durability way higher than their attack potency. And most Yu-Gi-Oh! Characters can take one hell of a beating. Like, one of the more mild cases is someone in Arc 5, or two people actually, getting blasted by a super powerful attack which shattered the wall. And that was... technically, it was supernatural, because it had more to do with that Zark person, like I said. But one thing to note about Arc 5 is, at that point, holograms became so advanced that they were actually physical. So the entire point of that anime, at least in the beginning, is that Like, they are performers, and they're action duels. You can actually ride on holograms. So in other words, yeah, no supernatural elements, technically, and they can still do harm. And that's one of the more mild cases, like I said. Another case, like in the Dark Side of Dimensions movie, Seto Kaiba casually jumps out of his jet mid-flight, lands on the ground like it's nothing. No shoulder bones at all. That alone should already make Ash's strength feats look kind of pathetic. Like, if someone can jump out of a freaking jet, Ash would think a few 100 pounds? Yeah, that's not gonna do much. And you could say, well, that's Seto Kaiba. He doesn't scale the Yugi. Well, first of all, I think with the Pharaoh, which they're definitely using for the death battle, obviously, like, he should just be more powerful than Kaiba, especially with the power to not only summon all 3 Egyptian gods, but to even fuse them together. But even if you ignore that, in the Season 4 anime for the original series, there is one point where both Yugi and Taya are on a train, and the train falls off a cliff. And while it knocked them out and someone had to help them, they survived. Yeah, that's insane. And you could argue that that was a filler arc, which, first of all, just because it's filler doesn't mean it's not canon. The anime and manga are different things entirely. If the anime just followed the manga completely, then people like Pegasus would just be murdered, and you would never see them again. And along with that, Death Battle doesn't always use composites, but they do always try to factor in as many things as possible. And if Bowser, for example, is allowed to use, like, Mario Party stuff, which isn't a big deal, by the way, don't, like, get mad about that. But if he's allowed to use that, then, like, obviously they're going to factor in, you know, like, Season 4. And I believe Season 4 also has another good feat where the Great Leviathan, if I remember correctly, makes a hurricane that was calced around moon level. If not that, then Zork having a feat where he makes an eclipse that blocks out the sun. I believe it's like moon to like planetary level at the bare minimum, I'm pretty sure. Doesn't really matter too much. Like, you can probably tell already, Ash is technically stronger, but it doesn't really matter. Ash does not have the means to, like, he can tackle Yugi, but it doesn't kill him. And since all of the monsters are, like, coming from his soul, he can't exactly, like, stop them from being summoned. Now, to be fair, maybe you can argue that Ash can, like, pin Yugi down, hold his arms, but if he can't kill Yugi, then, like, he's gonna be wasting a lot of time. You can maybe say that Ash can pin Yugi down, hold his arms up, and then, like, Skull Bash him to oblivion. But since Yugi's durability is way higher, at best, Ash, like, gets exhausted. At worst, he just actually kills himself in the process of doing that. But even that wouldn't work because of the thing I have been holding out for a while now, and that's the Egyptian God cards. The Egyptian God cards are so much more powerful than any typical Pokemon, or even more powerful than any typical monster. And the Egyptian gods, without a doubt, are the only Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters, at least in the original series, that at no point in time were ever just holograms. Every time the Egyptian gods were summoned, it passively started a shadow game, and even outside of duels, or even outside of, like, fighting, like in ancient Egypt, they still can interact with and manipulate the world. People tried making fake copies of them in the Battle City arc, and they either went insane or were killed instantly. So, yeah, it's gonna be hard for them to, like, you know, not do anything. Like, if Ash tries to mess with the Pharaoh, which all 3 of the God cards, you know, like, serve, they're just gonna fight back. They're gonna attack Ash. And even if they're weakened, they can still do something. Another example would be in the anime, where Yugi summons Slifer the Sky Dragon. He's fighting against Bakura, and one of, like, the pharaoh's servant, Priest's father, tries to sabotage him. So I believe he gets a sword or something and throws it at Slifer's tablet, which works. Slifer gets damaged, a little unresponsive, and then Dealbound literally cuts Slifer the dragon in half, completely destroying him. And do you know what happens? After he got destroyed, he sent a bolt of lightning down on the person that attacked his tablet. And keep in mind, this was in a room with like no sky, and lightning was still struck down on the person. You also have Pegasus. Pegasus didn't even release them to the public. He just tried painting them. He tried painting them and making 3 cards with them. And with that, the Egyptian gods, they gave him nightmares. They actually attacked him in his dreams and killed every other person involved in the project. You see one scene of somebody looking at Obelisk's hieroglyphic, and then Obelisk pops out and takes him. Another scene where a guy looks out and sees Swiper the Sky Dragon outside of his building. And that's just them being able to interact with people. What are they capable of? Well, along with... Along with, like, being able to make people go insane and whatnot, the Egyptian gods also can just absorb things. Like, when Seto Kaiba uses them, when he describes it, Obelisk's ultimate attack, as taking 2 monsters of his and literally absorbing their souls. The Winged Dragon of Ra has the ability to completely fuse with its owner. Merrick was able to sacrifice most of his life points but 1, which not only increased Ra's attack strength, but also had most of the body be fused with the Winged Dragon of Ra. And Slifer the Sky Dragon, I don't think it has any instances of killing anybody like Obelisk and Ra do. But it's also like, I think the one Yugi is most experienced with, that's like his Egyptian god and the one he uses the most. And one neat power about Slifer the Sky Dragon is, it has a second mouth, where every time something's summoned, Slifer fires, and it weakens it by 2,000 points. And if it goes to 0, it is destroyed. I don't know how you really... I don't know what the equivalent would be for Pokemon, but it also means that if Ash doesn't have all of his Pokemon out, when Slifer's already out, they'll immediately get weakened, if not completely destroyed. Now, one thing I'm not sure of is, like, how many Pokemon they're going to let Ash use, or with, like, different, like, gimmicks, like Mega Evolution, Z-Moves, Ash Greninja. I personally think it should be fine to just go with all of them. So, like, all 30 Tauros, all Pokemon from all regions, and, like, give him, like, his Z-Moves, Dynamax Ring, and, like, all of that. I think it's fair. Especially since for, like, Yugi, he's most likely using a deck of, like, 40 cards, so I think it's fair. Another thing I will say is, I forget, like, if Ash fights them directly, but basically, throughout his entire journey, he has met any and all legendary Pokemon, which includes Palkia Dialga, which, like, literally created the multiverse, Giratina, which is stronger than both of them, interacted with, like, Groudon, Kyogre, Rayquaza, and I'm pretty sure he, like, fights basically all of the mascot legendaries in the Hoopa movie. So, when it comes to Pokemon, I guess you could have, like, a scaling where he could be higher. I don't think it matters too much because of just the hacks with the Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but maybe. Although one thing that's going to be hard for Ash to beat is the ranking system with the Egyptian gods. Don't know what that is? Well, it's a little complicated, but basically the Egyptian gods have ranks, and if you're lower than those ranks, they just passively nullify anything done to you. So for example, there's one scene where Yugi tries to use not even like a regular monster, just like one of the Egyptian gods to attack Ra, but since Ra is a higher rank than Slifer, it just got completely nullified. And you have plenty of moments like this in the show. For example, the first time Yugi ever used a Cipher the Sky Dragon, Bakura was using a deck where a ghost possesses one of Yugi's monsters, and then use that monster to deal damage to Yugi's life points. The moment Slifer was out, Bakura tried to use the spirit to possess Slifer, and it just got completely nullified. And when that happened in the anime, there was also a field spell out, which basically made the sky very dark with eyes everywhere. I think it was called... not Dark Necrosphere. I forget what the name was called. But the point is, in the anime, the moment Slifer was summoned, not even fully summoned, just lighting with the wings sprouting out, that already made the field spell completely disappear. And you have Seto Kaiba, who is attacking these two guys. One of them tries to activate Mirror Force, which is a trap card that destroys all attack position monsters if the opponent acquires an attack. Completely didn't work on Obelisk, and just destroys all of them anyways. And in general, the Egyptian gods in the anime all have the effects where they can't be really targeted or destroyed. They're very hard to get rid of. And a lot of that has to do with their whole ranking system. And when it comes to that, yeah, I really don't see how Ash can beat that. But to be honest, for Death Battle, very good chance it'll be completely ignored. And you might even say that it might be something that only works with the Egyptian gods related to each other. So only Raw and the ranking system might only matter if it's just Raw versus the Egyptian gods or the Wicked gods. We don't know what the Wicked gods are. TLDR, in the manga, there was another, inspection after Battle City, where there's evil versions of the Egyptian gods. And with that, the Wicked Avatar was a rank higher, same as Raw's rank. So Obelisk and Slifer couldn't affect it. So Yugi needed to, actually use a card to bring Obelisk to the exact same rank, and bring both monsters to infinity before being able to destroy each other. Yeah, it's a long story, and I won't go over it here. But there's gotta be something for Ash. Trying to think, but it's really hard. Because, I like Ash a lot. I think Pokemon's really cool. And with Dynamax, Mega Evolution, and Z moves, I guess with these gimmicks, you can, scale them some of the legendaries. I guess Mega Evolution, or not Mega Evolution, Z moves are, able to compete with Tapu Koko, and Tapu Koko can, fight against Ultra the Crossma. Ultra the Crossma can, light up an entire multiverse. Dynamax is directly empowered by Eternatus, and there's a lot of moments where, Mega Pokemon can, whether on their own, or just, with the help of, other legendaries, do very impressive stuff, but this all leads to the final thing that I kind of alluded to at the very beginning, and that's the Millennium Puzzle. Ash could be completely physically superior, and his Pokemon, while it's unsure if they can, physically fight monsters and dual monsters, or, even be superior to them, none of it truly matters, because even without any of the monsters, the Millennium Puzzle alone is more than enough to deal with Ash. Let's start with the minor stuff, and that's making all of the spell and trap cards, able to be used. If Pikachu tries to use Thunderbolt, and let's say Ash has, all 30 of his Tauros in the back, what if Yugi just uses Mirror Force? Mirror Force or Magic Cylinder things to completely immobilize Ash's Pokemon? What if he uses Monster Reborn to bring back Slifer after it was somehow killed? What about all the different traps and spells for Dark Magician? And by the way, Dark Magician, I didn't even go with the rabbit hole with him. But Dark Magician, before becoming a dual monster, was literally one of the Pharaoh's, top, top people working for him. He had the Millennium Ring, and he was a powerful, just magician, as you can imagine. So we won't even go over him. What about, What about Pot of Greed? What if Ash sees Yugi draw 2 cards? What then? You get the point. Another thing I like to say is, there's also plenty of other monster effects that, like, could potentially be used. I can't think of any in particular, except for one that could be useful. That's with Buster Blader. Buster Blader has the ability where it gets stronger for every dragon in the opponent's field or graveyard. And Ash has Dragonite, Noivern, Goodra, Gibble, and Ash can, like, fuse that with Dark Magician, and then, like, that's already a pretty beefy monster. And, like, I don't know, like, you can maybe say it wouldn't apply, but I don't think it matters. And that's the team stuff Ash can do, or not Ash, Yugi can do with the Millennium Puzzle. Literally in the first episode, Yugi, like, completely mind crushes Kaiba, which doesn't really mean much in the anime, at least when you see in the scene. It's just kind of, Yugi has his hand out, and then there's, like, a negative filter on Kaiba. But in the manga, we have more context for it. And what he did was, he completely shattered Seto Kaiba's mind, and the visual effect, or at least what it looked like, is, like, his mind shattered in a bunch of, like, puzzle pieces. And Kaiba had to, like, piece by piece, put it back together. You have one instance where someone tries to shoot Yugi, so he uses the puzzle to make the guy think he's completely on fire. In the first episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Season 0, the first time Yugi ever completes the puzzle, he puts a guy in a, like, he mentally tortures someone and makes him think he's being eaten alive the entire time. In Duelist Kingdom, one person fires a flamethrower at Yugi, but the puzzle reacts before it hurts him. The Millennium Puzzle is busted, and it can create shadow games. And if we know from Season 0, the Pharaoh is very willing to use shadow games. And shadow games are more than just playing a card game, because they change. Most of the time, once you get to, like, the later parts of, like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, they're just playing a card game, basically. But it could be anything, really. And the sad part is that Yugi can give penalty games if someone cheats or loses, and it can be basically anything. And there's also different punishments, too. You see a lot of them with Merrick. Merrick had one where duelists were connected to their monsters, so if the monsters were destroyed, they physically felt the same pain. When he fights Yugi, he had, like, both of their alternative soul counterparts, and whenever someone lost life points, the shadows ate away that person. Something very similar when he fought Bakura, where the loser would be completely, like, destroyed by the shadows, which is particularly impressive because Bakura is Zork, who is the literal embodiment of darkness. And Bakura, before being in that duel, there was a small moment where he possessed a small part of the Millennium Puzzle, and he was able to hide in that. If it weren't for a small part of him hiding in the puzzle, he would have been completely destroyed by a shadow game. And Ash has no way of leaving, because once someone gets challenged to a shadow game, it's impossible to leave. There's another moment where Bakura is doing these guys. One of them tries to run, he runs straight, and ends up back right where he started. And after those guys lost, Bakura sent them straight to hell. Now, I don't think Yugi is going to send Ash to hell. And since Yugi became more, like, you know, what's the word? Compassionate, at least with the Pharaoh, as, like, time went on, there's a good chance that if they two had an actual death battle, they wouldn't even have the two of them, like, have Yugi start a shadow game. But it doesn't really matter, because once you have the Egyptian gods, they passively summon one. The gods, like, if they don't put someone in the coma, they just kill people whenever they use in duels. And it's like, yeah, like, Ash is not, he's not getting out of that. There's gotta be some things for Ash, like, and I'm not gonna say it's impossible for him to win, because with death battle logic, like, I think for the most part, while I think sometimes the research is pretty flawed, I think it's mostly okay. But I also feel like there's a lot of nuance that you don't really get, which is fine, because a lot of stuff I'm saying with Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like super niche stuff. Like the Ka and Boss stuff, like that's stuff that most Yu-Gi-Oh! Players probably wouldn't even know about. If you try looking on Ba on Google, you're probably going to get Yu-Gi-Oh! Burning Abyss before anything else, which is very annoying when it comes to doing research, but if you know your stuff, you can know where to find it. That's a generic statement, but like, whatever. The point is, Ash, with Death Battle logic, they can probably say that, like, through Ultra Necrozma or Pokken Dialga scaling, that he can just beat Yugi, and with high willpower, he can resist mind games, which I do not agree with at all. Literally, every single Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonist and rival has high willpower. Basically, all of them have, like, the ability to, like, with their determination, get whatever card they need, or just create new forms of cards with their souls. Especially in the newer series, like Zexal or like 5Ds, there are so many cases where someone gets powered up and by their soul, and there's just a new transformation or a new card that's never been seen before. But it doesn't really matter. Like, I might be a little upset if Yugi loses, but that's mostly because I think any explanation would be ridiculous. I love both of these franchises to death, and if it's any, like, consolation, even if I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to win, and even if I have a lot of, like, or I'd say a decent amount of Yu-Gi-Oh! Videos, I have way more Pokemon videos on this channel. I'm mostly a what-if YouTuber for putting new Pokemon in the first generation of Pokemon competitively. Like, if you go to some of my recent videos, it'll be like Mega Dragonite or Mega Victory Bell and Gen 1 OU. And if you're interested in that, like, please, like, check out my channel. I would appreciate the support. But that's probably going to be it for here. I'd like to give a shout out to my friends Shad and Dank Potato. I asked them if either of them had, like, a Yugi versus Ash thumbnail, which, you know, you're seeing right here. I'm going to link both of them in the description below. And that's going to be it. Now, I'm always open to debate. If you think Ash has good reasons to win, or if you think there's something I'm glazing or underestimating, let me know in the comments. Also, let me know if you enjoyed this video, because I don't do a lot of these, but if I see this do well, I'd be willing to, you know, maybe do more of these. I don't know if I'll, like, go over my thoughts on every death battle, because, like, most of the time, there were characters I don't really know, so there's not much I can comment on. But if you're interested in just, like, versus matchups in general, I can go over the ones I'm always knowledgeable on. I think that'd be kind of cool. But that's gonna be it for now. Thank y'all for watching, and until next time, I look forward to hearing from you.